Good afternoon. Everyone has heard of global warming and climate change, but do you know what it really is? Global warming and climate change refers to an increase in average global temperature. Natural events and human activities are believed to be contributing to an increase in global temperature by releasing greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, such as carbon dioxide. Almost all countries contribute in some way to this increasing in global temperature, and almost all humans are directly impacted by these effects. In Denmark, people are vulnerable in many ways due to these effects of increasing global temperature and based on their castle location. The annual average temperature in Denmark will increase by 1 or 2 degrees in Celsius by 2050. Due to this rising of temperature, it will cause a lot of natural disasters, such as floods, and it will impact human lives and around the coast and near the riverbanks. One of the major impact is the loss of crops due to the dry weather and affecting their agriculture. Also melting glaciers that have been around for centuries. Annual average precipitation is rising. They're expected to increase about 7% by 2050, with the highest increase during the winter. This can lead to the elevation of the sea levels and droughts near the coast regions. Danish water is becoming warmer and less salty, affecting the wildlife in water, causing them to move locations. This will cause huge impact on the fishing industry, hence impacting their economy. Extreme weather events become more destructive and more frequent. This will cause more weather-related injury and disease. Due to the rising of sea level, the lowland farming and agriculture will be wiped away. So these are the vulnerabilities to the people in Denmark.
However, not all effects of climate change are negative. The warming climate provides many opportunities for people. The first opportunity of climate change is higher average temperatures lead to an increase in productivity of forests and plants. This will affect mountain regions and other places that are heavily dependent on the woods. Advances in tree improvement leads to the intensive housing and protection of sites and landscapes of high cultural, spiritual, or recreational value. Increase the culture of cottonwood, hybrid, poplar, black walnut, and oaks. The second opportunity of climate change is milder winters. Warmer winters making cold weather more bearable. Milder winters may in general entail a reduced demand of heating, saving energy which reduces the population. Increased tourism of the country, specifically urban areas with large cities, as well as longer lifespan of buildings since they won't be in harsh buildings. Increased tourism of the country will make population greater and more people will spend time outside. In addition, less people will get sick in warmer winter conditions. The third opportunities of climate change is increasing temperature of Denmark can also lead to better construction. This improves area in Denmark, specifically the less fortunate that need some assistance in construction. Individuals will be able to transport places more easily with new construction around. The new type of construction materials that are environment protection materials like aluminum plate, curtain wall, and foam concrete block. Therefore, the natural product used to build roads are preserving the environment. The fourth opportunities of climate change, temperature of water will begin to increase in oceans. In addition, not as much salt will remain in the water. Lowering the salt improves Denmark's water supply by making it safer to drink. Individuals that depend on the ocean will be able to use warm water as a way to clean themselves, along with the use of cooking. Increasing biomass of different species such as plankton, this organism play a huge part in the ocean's carbon cycle. Warmer ocean will attract people and therefore increase the tourism of Denmark. As a result, from a higher population, more money will be brought in for the country. So the last opportunity of climate change is the changing climate has resulted in varying lengths of different seasons, make better agricultural production. Increases in temperature and carbon dioxide can increase crops yield in both rural and coastal areas. The cities won't be affected by the rise in temperatures as much. In Denmark, the winter have reduced, giving way to summer. Rural areas will have prolonged their growing season because of warmer winter. The extension of summer makes it possible to produce more summer crops like snap beans, corns, cucumbers, and melons. Therefore, the Danes will be able to be their source of food for much longer time.
Prior to the Industrial Revolution, Denmark's economy was agriculture-based. In the 1500s, the population of Denmark dropped drastically due to the Black Death, and this significantly took a role on Denmark's economy. Specifically, this caused individuals to rely on subsistence agriculture in small rural communities. Exports were also estimated to have been about 5% of GDP at this time. These exports mainly include oxen and grain. In addition, they had a high land-labor ratio. So when the Black Death happened, this forced peasants to stay on the estate and do labor services to restock the economy since it was so low. During the global imperialism, Denmark colonized many parts, including Greenland, parts of India, and Africa. Agriculture and man-made products were sold at trading posts located in Africa, so this increased the economic flow. Denmark also colonized certain areas of the Caribbean known as the Danish West Indies. Here, it was a sugar-based economy, and this little island was called St. Thomas. After the Industrial Revolution, Denmark began to adapt to newer technology to better their economy. Specifically, Denmark switched from using wood to coal. This increased energy allowed for more efficient machines. Without these fossil fuels, the machines would not have contributed as much product. So now, with the coal, they are allowed to contribute more product. After the Industrial Revolution, Denmark began to export many different products. This included machinery, instruments, and textile mills. Because of these exports, this increased the economy rates and decreased the unemployment rate. Denmark also advances agriculture techniques and products. Instead of exporting grain, butter and bacon were being sent out to industrial-based countries. This allowed the dairy industry to soar. As for the anthropogenic contributions, Denmark has contributed in many different ways. Specifically, clearing the land for farming, deforestation, and burning fossil fuels were all many contributions that humans took part in that increased the climate change. Specifically, Denmark burned coal in order to heat or cool their homes around the cities. This contributed to adding more CO2 in the air, which increased the global climate change. As for the history of fossil fuels in Denmark, the fossil fuels that were used were very minimal before the Industrial Revolution. Before wood was traded in for coal and iron, Denmark struggled with energy resources. Land was driven by deforestation, so there were a lack of supplies. Timber was the only valuable export Denmark had, since all they had were trees. Therefore, the burning of fossil fuels was very minimal at this time. In the late 1900s, after the Industrial Revolution, Denmark switched from wood to coal. The country realized that neighboring countries like Norway needed lumber, so they traded with one another. Coal is still used for many different activities in Denmark. Specifically, 48% of Denmark's electricity comes from coal. In particular, district heating required the burning of coal to generate heat. However, this resource is imported, so other countries don't rely on Denmark for coal. During the global imperialism, Denmark was able to export their products to Greenland as well. Because Greenland had very few resources, they relied on Denmark for other supplies on top of the lumber. Oil was imported to Denmark, which was then exported to Greenland since they had no fossil fuel income. In addition to oil, gasoline was exported as Denmark began to industrialize. As for today, Denmark's current emissions have been limited. Specifically, Denmark emits around 6.8 metric tons per capita of CO2 when fossil fuels are burned. This amount seems dangerous, however, other countries are emitting a lot more compared to Denmark. Specifically, Luxembourg produces about 18.3 metric tons per capita, and Mongolia produces around 14.5 metric tons per capita. Denmark also hopes to become fossil fuel free by 2050. Today, Denmark produces 7 million cubic meters of oil. As a result of this great amount, the oil is not only used on machines, but it is exported to other countries, as said in the previous slides, specifically Norway. This also powers cars and generates electricity all over Denmark, so oil is very helpful for this country. This oil used is to generate cars and generate the electricity around Denmark, as well as export to other countries.
Denmark has a long history in deforestation since their economy is primarily agriculture-based. Denmark had a lot of deforestation before the Industrial Revolution. Due to the agriculture-based economy, farmers cut down trees to grow crops. Sheep were also brought to Denmark to make wool. The animals would graze on the land, which prevented the regeneration of trees. Forest degradation was caused by natural disasters and the Black Death. Flooding, storms, and sand drifts covered the land and took down forests. Trees were killed along with many other crops. The Black Death also renewed the forests and lands. As the population lowered, timber was used to rebuild houses and stables. As a result of deforestation and forest degradation, the carbon footprint significantly increased. Cutting down trees increased the amount of CO2 in the air. The timber that was cut down from the trees was also traded for coal, which helps heat homes. This process allowed for individuals to contribute to climate change. The more coal burned, the more energy used. In other words, burning coal increased the CO2 in the air, which led to change in temperatures. 53% of people in Denmark settle in terraced or detached houses. The population is made up of 3 different kinds of people: wealthy Danes, middle-class Danes, which is about 75% of the population, and poor Danes. 6.3% of the Danish population is unemployed and struggling to make money on the streets. These lifestyles adapt and contribute to the carbon footprint in different ways. Those in poverty contribute the least to the carbon footprint, yet they are hit the hardest with climate change and cannot adapt as well. This is because they don't have the money to fix their homes or purchase the required necessities. Those considered wealthy will be the ones most adaptable to climate change, and they also contribute the most to the carbon footprint. Since they live in houses with district heating, that uses large amounts of energy and increases the amount of CO2 in the air when fossil fuels like coal are burned for energy. One population that's more vulnerable than other populations is women. As temperatures continue to rise, floods and hurricanes become more likely. According to Nordic Cooperation, more percent of women die during these evacuations because they don't know how to swim or climb a tree. Also, women in Denmark receive a lower income than men. Therefore, when a catastrophic event happens, men can adapt easier while women continue to struggle to survive. They have little money, making them unable to pay for adaptations. Due to global warming, floods begin to significantly increase, which contaminates the healthy water with the groundwater. This exposes many of the poor to diseases and other deadly illnesses. Homes also begin to deteriorate as the climate changes. They are also forced to pay higher taxes in order to compensate for all the damages in the city. Another vulnerable population is Denmark's indigenous people. These types of people own landscapes with many cultural traditions tied to their land. For example, a group of indigenous people in Denmark have a part of the land dedicated for prayer. Each family member gathers around the corner of the land and prays for their past ancestors. Flowers are planted, and incense fills the area. This allows them to become closer with their God and one step closer to heaven. They are also vulnerable due to the fact that they are denied many rights and are poorly represented in most of the decisions made within their country. As passes through, their traditions become demolished. In the process, toxic weather forces them to move away from their sacred land and distance themselves from their faith. The last vulnerable population of Denmark is the Greenland indigenous people. These individuals were known as the Inuit immigrants with many different ancestor groups. One specific group was called the Thule immigrants. As part of their culture, they brought in dogs during the freezing winters and created dog sleds. This allowed them to travel from land to land and hunt animals for food. Due to global warming, the winters are no longer as cold and snow is beginning to melt. This prevents them from traveling with the dog sled. As a result, their source of food becomes scarce and restricts the Thules to hunt solely on the land that they live on. Another reason is with the increasing temperature, Denmark decided to use warm weather to influence tourism. Each landmark was filled with thousands of Americans as they took in the beauty of Greenland. This affected the Thules because each area of land was used for hunting purposes, as opposed for another beautiful place for people to gawk at.
In order to make the vulnerable populations live better, there are ways Denmark can adapt to climate change, but they come with their own consequences. There are some trade-offs when adapting to climate change. The first is adapt renewable energy to reduce greenhouse gas into atmosphere and reduce Denmark's carbon footprint. The second is plant more trees and forests to absorb carbon dioxide and release more oxygen into air. The third is create new construction, take down or renovate dikes or ports to prepare for rising sea levels or storms that come along with climate change. The fourth is take advantage of the longer growing season due to warmer weather. The government could suggest that the farms should trade with more countries and trade over a market for a certain crop. This will increase profits for local farmers as well as provide more food. The fifth is Denmark could promote tourism. They could advertise to nearby countries with online ads and billboards. Increased temperature could increase tourism in Denmark, giving local businesses more profits. Denmark as a country is very passionate about climate change and adapting and trying to reduce greenhouse gases. For the Denmark's political platform, one of Denmark's key goals in relation to climate change is to create a society full of renewable energy. As of right now, 20% of their energy comes from wind turbines, but the goal is to use 100% renewable energy by 2050. In effort to work with other countries to stop climate change, Denmark joined the UNFCCC. Denmark's political platform under UNFCCC and Kyoto. Denmark joined Annex 1 of the UNFCCC in June of 1990 and ratified Kyoto in May of 2002. In 1990, Denmark adopted its first action plan with reduction of carbon dioxide emissions as the objective. From 2008 to 2012, Denmark wanted to reduce greenhouse gases emissions by 21% compared to emissions in 1990. And what's more, under the Paris Agreement, Denmark's goal was to reduce greenhouse gases emissions and to limit global warming under 2 Celsius degrees. In order to do this, they decided to cut off fossil fuels slowly over the years. As of today, Denmark wants to be fossil fuel free by 2050. Current goal is to reach 100% renewable energy by 2050. Complete financing of all the new energy policy initiatives has been secured. Denmark continues to finance others.
There are many things Denmark has done to involve themselves in climate change efforts like implementation of the EU emission trading scheme. The EU ETS working on a cap and trade principle. A cap is the maximum amount of CO2 that can be emitted by programs in a system. The trade aspect allows companies to buy emission allowances from other countries if they emit too much CO2. However, thanks to the national allocation plan, the allowances are limited. Therefore, companies are forced to emit very small portions of CO2, which helps reduce global warming. If emissions are reduced and there is still allowance, then the money can go to other future endeavors. The second one, Copenhagen Climate Change Conference in December 2009. Around 115 world leaders attend the conference, making it one of the largest gathering of world leaders ever outside UN headquarters in New York. The Denmark government hosted this. This meeting made an advanced arrangement on the infrastructure needed for global climate change cooperation and made improvements to the clean development mechanism of the Kyoto Protocol. The third one, allocation of funds to CDM and JI. In the last decade, Denmark's government have financed CDM projects in the non-annexed countries. They have helped reduce GHGs in countries like Egypt, Malaysia, and Thailand by donating 100 million. Denmark benefits from this by investing in CERs under Kyoto. African countries have problems attracting investment for the CDM project, so Denmark created a green development facility with the help of UNEP Centrist Rosa. The government will create different ways to draw investors in which helps both Denmark and African countries. Denmark advanced the CDM and JI organizations with strategy consisting of the following contributes to meeting Denmark's GHG reduction target through the purchase of CERS, promote the transfer of technology and sustainable development to developing countries, the integration of Danish companies in the CDM market, they expand the CDM market through improvement in institution and capacity development in developing countries. Number 4, under the Kyoto Protocol, Denmark has put an annual tax on car called the Green Owner Tax. In 1997, the tax replaced the weight-based tax, hoping people would purchase cars that are more energy efficient. Cars that are more energy efficient have lower registration and green owner tax, which gives incentive to buy them. It creates less GHGs and reduces the annual temperature rise. Energy efficient cars purchase increased 20% since 2005. Travel by bicycle is highly encouraged. Instead of driving a car, many citizens use bikes that don't contribute any GHGs to the environment. The last one, agreement on the action plan for the aquatic environment. Implemented in 2005 to reduce the rising nitrous oxide in the environment, mostly the aquatic life. Denmark believed that agriculture was promoting the rise in nitrogen level. To stop nitrogen from being emptied into the atmosphere and aquatic areas, the action plan was proposed. For nitrogen, the aim was to reduce leaching from agriculture by a minimum of 13% by 2015 compared to 2003. The reduction of nitrogen prevents it from forming nitrogen X. The reduction of nitrous oxide leads to a decrease in temperatures. The APAE has reduced one of the GHGs tremendously by cutting the excess nitrogen from farming. This plan helps contribute to the UNFCCC and helps save species that live in any bodies of water.
Denmark has been fortunate enough to contribute greatly in efforts to stop climate change due to its money supply and technology. Starting in 2010, Denmark has contributed more than $7.5 billion to supporting fighting climate change, including $2 billion from the climate envelope. The funds were for climate change and adaptation in developing countries. The Paris Agreement has been essential in helping Denmark finance developing countries. In addition to that effort, the Danish government also passed the National Pesticide Action Plan that aimed to reduce pesticide load by 40% through tax policy. In the 1900s, Denmark didn't have the top-of-the-line technology to help them invest in other countries and adapt to the disasters climate change has created. Therefore, all the country could do was limit actions. For example, they could start turning off the lights in their homes and conserve water. Later on, as technology and money increased, Denmark began to advance their involvement and begin reducing temperatures in other countries.
Since climate change will be an ongoing issue for future generations to come, Denmark should continue to unite other countries and agree to limit GHGs. In other words, Denmark should continue to invest in CDM projects in developing countries. As a result from this investment, certified emission reductions will be exchanged in return. These certified emission reductions would help the global warming in Denmark because it would reduce the CO2 emissions. As for the adaptation for future negotiations, Denmark should consider in creating more taxes. It seems that more individuals make a change whenever money is involved since it's limited. One suggestion could consist of raising the green owner tax in order to give incentive for people to buy more green vehicles. Another suggestion that Denmark suggests is to invest in new technology relating to renewable energy. Geothermal energy is an example of this, along with the fossil fuel reduction by 2050. Denmark plans to be fossil fuel free by this year, so using renewable energy would help complete this goal. Although financial costs come with lowering greenhouse gases, investing now will benefit the future generations. As seen from the game in class, investing their money left the third generation in good hands. There is more than enough money for global warming solutions. The financial cost for the recommendations of Denmark will benefit citizens. Increasing the taxes by another $20 or so may not be seen as the best idea, however, it keeps individuals safe in the long run. For example, raising the green owner tax will promote Danes to drive safer, energy-efficient cars instead of the ones that burn fossil fuels. They are quicker, safer, and run smoother, according to Berman. Therefore, Danes will not only want to buy these types of cars, but they will benefit them the most. A consequence from this suggestion would be the amount of money that individuals need to pay. More money will come out of their pockets, which may affect the life of their children and loved ones. So for people who are interested in still buying electric cars, this will be a negative effect because more money will be required. Another example to reduce the greenhouse gases would be to invest in countries' CDM projects. Financing other countries will require more money out of citizens' pockets. However, the country will receive more bang for their buck. They will receive certified emission reductions every time they invest their money in a different country's project. In addition to this, investing in new technology and renewable energy will also be cost beneficial. Using renewable energy is cheaper for the long run than using energy produced from the burning of fossil fuels. Not only is it safer for the environment, but it promotes a healthy lifestyle. As for the technology, Denmark will be able to create new ways on how to curb greenhouse gases.
With all these new climate change recommendations, there will be concerns for the vulnerable population, but there will also be many benefits for them. The women in Denmark will be benefited by the researches and new renewable energy technologies because they will have more opportunities to get a job and skill training, as well as they will have more chances to get rid of their stereotypes. Placing a green owner tax on cars will pull out more pressure on the poor people because they are already financially struggling. They won't be willing to or cannot afford a natural tax or an energy-efficient cars. However, the government can change the situation by putting more funds into the technologies, make the product more affordable for the poor people. Under Denmark's plan, their goal is to use 100% of clean and renewable energy by 2050. However, the renewable energy technologies nowadays will not operate properly under extreme cold conditions. For Greenland, as a colonized territory in Arctic Circle, has no choice but follow the orders. And these technologies could be placed on sacred land and destroy their cultural traditions. On the other hand, the government may offer money in exchange for use of this land and help the economy as well as the climate change situation in the area. By doing that, the indigenous people in Greenland will also benefit it because the temperature will not rise and they can have a solid food supply. Overall, Denmark has many vulnerabilities that are currently happening: rising of temperature, rising sea levels, more severe weathers, and so on. However, Denmark has already participated in many ways with UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol, and Paris Agreement. However, Denmark has already participated in many ways in UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol, and Paris Agreements. These actions will allow Danish to reduce the effects of the greenhouse gases. After all, Denmark needs to spend its fund not only in clean energy research and production, but also in medical bills to cover uncommon diseases and severe weather injuries, as well as building or rebuilding infrastructures to prevent climate change related damages. The Danish government needs to make decisions according to local conditions to fulfill the citizens' needs and to make policies to benefit their own people.